this week, and Cote, for everyone that's in the Twitch, but everybody else that's maybe watching later, I want them to know that this is going to be published on YouTube. It's going to have a nice descriptive title and description as well. So that's going to be an exciting change rather than just like the same old, title that comes out. So that's going to be our attempt to get more media savvy, to break into the video world. We're going to write better titles and descriptions.
I think
an exciting moment.
So let me add the yes and to that, Brandon. That is, first of all, fantastic.
You can build on it. Yes.
I think, and I have been putting a lot of thought recently into what is the value of Twitch, and this is like here we go. This is a tough love, to use that phrase, analysis of my media management. I feel like just I am about get successful in any channel, I abandon it and go to another one. And so, I don't know what we have. I think we have the most interaction with people in Twitch, but I feel like YouTube might be the better option.
Well, I like it. I mean, to me, it's become like Twitch is great because it is the real time, if you will, kind of interaction where we can actually talk to people. And that's where people that want to like chat with us, that's where they go. So it's simple as that. And then YouTube is our ultimate repository. That's at least how I think of it as. Because I think the Twitch videos, they like disappear after like two weeks or 2 months or something like that. So that's the goal, But I don't know. I always think, sometimes people, and we're gonna mention this on the show. I'll make sure this goes in the show later when I mention it, is like some people are interested in like how a podcast is made. Like, I don't know. Are you like, I'm interested in that. Like, I kind of I like to see what other people are doing to get ideas, steal ideas.
Yeah.
So I know a few people in the Slack are interested in that. So I'm going to basically say, hey, listen, if you want to watch like how the sausage is being made, not that like we're necessarily good at it, but I think sometimes people just like want to watch something that they've heard, like how it gets made. Then, we can show that, right?
Yep.
We can show the sausage making, which I think is fun. It can be fun.
Everyone loves making sausage. They just maybe don't know it yet.
That's right.
I think. Yeah. Well, I put a tweet out with that we're recording, and I put one to Twitch, and then I replied to my tweet and said, or in YouTube.
Yeah, so we're on Twitch, and it goes live on YouTube. The place it doesn't, the place that we still have to manually, and I just did it, I have to manually put a little message in is Slack, right? I want there to be a simple way from Restream to like have it just like drop a message into.
Right? Yeah.
But it's just, I don't know. It can be done like a numerous ways, but more. I started to write this entire Python script to be like, I'm going to try to automate all the stuff that we do.
Whoa!
Podcast, but I was like, oof, this is just like, it's not hard, but it's time consuming, I guess.
Did you apply one of my favorite principles? I already have a job.
Yeah,
I think that's what I would have applied there.
But I've been doing like little projects to like kind of learn. I try to like come up with little projects. Like I learned Jupyter. Learn is in quotations there. I wanted experience with Jupyter notebooks. So like I created little projects for data analysis. So now I know how to use them. And I kind of learned that like I could probably still do most everything that I want in Excel. But I see now, at least I know like, oh, I get it. Like why you would do Jupyter notebooks. Like, so it's good. And that way now when people talk about it, I can be like, oh, I get it. So the latest one is like landing pages. Like, do you do GitHub landing pages?
Oh man,
other one. Like I just want like a quick way to create a little page. And so I've been trying to like, there's AWS has a landing page thing, and GitHub has one. And then I was talking to Noah SSHJJ, and he's got his own little framework. I'm like,
oh
okay,
man,
like what's the way to do this these days?
That is. I think we can have a what do they call it? A mini series. We need to have a mini series that's just all about this stuff, Brandon. Because this is, you can imagine every day these kind of things. They either haunt me or they are like a barking room of dogs that I have to quiet down to just like get on with my day. And just like the landing page thing, right? I always want a better landing page, but I'm a longtime WordPress.com user. And so I'm always just like, just go make a page on it. You're not going to like the way it looks. It's going to seem really weird, but just like, it'll get what you want. It's done. Yeah. You don't need to fart around with this. Just go do it. And
it's true. But then I don't know. Like
thanks to us using Fireside, you can always just go to Fireside and make a page.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen, there's like, that's what I think though. There are like a million ways to do it, but like I haven't hit on the way I want to do it yet. Like,
Oh,
I don't know.
man,
And I'm
you're telling
always,
me.
and then I see other ways. I'm like, oh, this will be good. Like lately I've been doing the GitHub one. I've been trying that one. And I was like, and then I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want. Then I started doing it. I'm like, I don't think this is what I want, you know? So now I'm going to try the AWS static page next.
So
and I bet you that's going to be like, I'm not sure that's what I want either, but I'm going to do it.
I'm telling you, you get yourself a WordPress.com account and then lower your standards, and you'll just like your life will be happier.
Like WordPress is incredibly successful, and I hate it. Like I don't know. Like I don't know what to say about it. Like its success makes me like sad in some way. It's not. Yeah, it's great. Yeah. They have essentially won half the internet sites are WordPress, and I get it, but I don't like it. You know, so I don't know. I don't know where it leaves me. It's like maybe it's like an Apple Windows kind of debate. Like it's just preference. Like sure, Windows is, you can do everything with Windows. It's fine, and it's usable, but I don't like to use it. You know what I mean? It's just like,
the other option is maybe I think iCloud has websites, right? We could maybe we should check into that. You can
check on the Apple side.
You can publish an Apple Note or a what do they call their word competitor, keys or something? Documents. Maybe you can just pages. Maybe you can just publish a pages directly to like, you know, me.com/bewitchered. And
all right. Well, we won't do 4 hours on landing pages. We'll
that's for the bonus content.
That's the bonus. That'll be in the Patreon feed.
Yeah,
that we don't have. It's not Patreon. It's Substack. That'll be the Substack we haven't quite created yet. I think that will be part of like we're actually gonna have a Substack where we just critique newsletters. Right?
Oh, that would be awesome.
Ben Thompson, he's got a new thing going. Like I want to go so meta where it's like we actually apply aggregation theory to Ben Thompson's stratechery.
Oh yeah,
and now his new Star Tech podcast and Dithering, and we go through the whole like process of him creating sub brands, confusing us, and then we commentate.
Oh, I see what you're.
He commentates on Apple, and we're like, this doesn't make any sense. Like, what is Dithering? Why do we need Dithering? It doesn't make any sense. What about stratechery? Stratechery's dead, but we love that podcast. But now it's Star Tech. What's Star Tech? And am I even saying any of these words right? Like we go, that's how meta we go, right?
Yeah.
And then we hope somebody then critiques our podcast by doing the same thing, right?
I think
it's just a chain of commentary to the bottom, right? To the absolute bottom.
I think this is hitting on something I was distressing. I was consternating about last week, which is, you know, I listened to all the podcasts, Brandon, and I feel like if you have a podcast about movies, politics, or like everyday life stuff, it's just totally accessible to have a podcast because like you have a wide audience and you don't have to like know that much. It's easy to know about it, right? Like, you know, the thing I'm always complaining about is like, there's only so much commentary you can do on Kubernetes because you can't actually go out and install all of the different types of Kubernetes and then live through scaling it up to supporting 500, if not 5,000 applications on it, right? So it's sort of like...
It is a high bar to like get a lot of real world experience.
Right. So a lot of what you're talking about when you talk about something like Kubernetes is sort of like you're trying to like forward pattern match about this looks like something that will be successful and then pull together anecdotes and survey data points about what's happening. And at best, you can be like the Kubernetes thought lords of old, right? Who like actually would stand up on stage and like, you know, with the help of Terraform and a few other things, like get it up and running, right? And you can be like that. Those times that I tried to get it up and running on its own, it was this, that, or the other, right? Anyways, however, if you go watch a movie or a TV show, you've done it. Like all you have to do is talk about like your experience with the movie or TV show.
It's like surface area or something like that. Yeah, like the surface area to become a expert in something. If it's too wide, you can't become a pundit on it.
And even cars, I feel like are in this category. While they are complex machinery, because when you talk about a car, you don't talk about like the engineering that went into like how battery power is transferred between the coupling and the whatever, right? Like you're not. And anyways. So I think what you found, Brandon, is the infinitely scalable revenue source for media for our industry, which is doing the on the media treatment of other people talking about our stuff, right? So
that's even better.
What we are discussing is the discussion other people are having about all these Kubernetes clusters, right?
Oh, and so gosh, that is so in our wheelhouse. That would be
right,
so
and we actually do have combined together, I would suggest at least 40 years. Of experience with sort of like the discussion, the marketing, the buzz, the community around enterprise technologies. So we have hands-on experience with that. So we actually can draw upon like, well, listen, when you're doing this kind of thing, you can tell that they've been through really good media training. Because what you can tell is across these 10 different podcasts, the same phrases are said. You can take this phrase and search in Google News, and once that same phrase is used over and over again, you know that you have just been served a fantastically dressed sweet plate of bullshit. And so
that's good. Well, that was sort of the Exegesis podcast, which sort of died off there in the Patreon feed. But I don't know. I think we'll have to we still have the interviews feed. Maybe at some point we do. Maybe we make it a tech media punditry podcast. I don't know if that's going to have a lot. Maybe we'll just kind of throw, because that's some ways we just throw strategy in the title and we kind of do like a little Ben Thompson list.
I think
that maybe is what we do, right?
I think this
meta.
I think this is a great idea, Brandon. Not least of which because I like it and have been evolving it. But
and we'll do it.
I think what you do is you follow your friend Ben's model, which is slightly obscure topic. So you charge a premium relative to other stuff, right? I mean, basically, if you want to consume Ben's content, it's $100 a year, which is actually a pretty good deal. But I think what that means is I can't do math, but what is that? That's $6 or $10 a month that people would pay, and so you just we'll just call it 10 because fuck it, why not, right? So you're gonna pay $10 a month. And then each, maybe 2 times a month, more if we get excited, you get commentary about what we think about other people. That's all right. So that's basically what people want to hear is but what do you think about that?
Maybe what we'll do then. Okay, we'll leave it here. Then we'll get on. It's maybe what could come out is I don't know if you ever listened to the Acquired podcast where they basically go through the history of a company and talk about why it was successful.
I can't stand to listen to startups talk anymore, but that's fine.
That's fine. That
could be a whole episode.
That's all. So what we're gonna do though is I think what we should do is we're gonna do that, but we're gonna do that for Stratechery, right? We're actually going to treat Stratechery as a company. And we'll go through here's how it started. Here, I've heard a bunch of Ben Thompson interviews. So we could go through his history, talk about what he did, right? Talk about why he did it. And then we talk about how he branched out. I think there's some numbers in there. We kind of estimate what kind of money he's
I love it.
So we do that. That we'll treat his, we'll try to apply kind of what he does to himself. We'll make that an entire episode, right? And we'll just see what happens, right?
Oh, I love it. I love it.
And so, and then maybe if that goes well, then we'll do that. Next one we'll do Matt Levine, right? Yeah. And the next one we'll do
it's media criticism for enterprise
and then maybe
technology.
We do Matt Iglesias after that, right? And we just, but we we never actually dive in. We're not going to talk about Matt Iglesias' topics. We're not going to get into his real estate model. We're going to talk about how he's built the empire around that. So all right, so, right. So really, people are going to love it. It's going to be great.
Yeah. It's regular behind the scenes how we think about it.
Behind the scenes.
It's basically like Serial except less murder and injustice. I think is what we're gonna do. And maybe I don't want to put some work on you, but I think Hindenburg can do some audio ducking, right? Yeah. So maybe we can have some long pauses and jazzy music. Yeah, that'll be good.
All right. Well, let's get this podcast going. So just let's get it going for real because I need a real edit point. Even though there's some good commentary, though, I'm sure it'll be in the post show, in the pre-show, post show kind of stuff.
Well, we got to break it here. I'll record it for you. It'll be all right. Hey everyone, in today's after show, Brandon and I are thinking of a new format that would be paid, but it would be high quality. So if you are interested in that, I mean, we're thinking $10 a month. That's US dollars, and which we can totally do. I mean, technically. And if you're interested in what we were going to talk about here, you should tell us. And I don't know, we probably need not that many. We just need some growth rate, but it'd be a fun thing to try out to do. And not fun. And remember in the blogging days, people would be like, I'm just experimenting with this. We're not experimenting. We're trying to make extra money. There's no experimentation. It's that would be great.
All right. So if you're interested in that, email us with any input at questions@softwaredefinedtalk.com. Whether you think it's a good idea or a bad idea, and we think it's a good idea, we'll look into creating some type of paid feed.
And I want to be crystal clear, you do not need to send your mailing address to that email address, because I know that's what you're used to if you email us. Right, Brandon?
All right, good. I'll put that at the end. That'll be the beginning of the post show. So we'll put in that. See if anyone listens through and emails us, that'll be perfect.
I'm telling you, anyone who listens through to that is going to be the kind of people who would sign up. That's what I think.
That's why I always put the stuff at the end. It's like, hey, you made it to the end. It means you want more. This is
you got to qualify.
All we got left is like unstructured audio clips. That's it.
I'm just saying, don't bring me these unqualified deals. I don't have time. I got a lot of webinars I got to do. All right.
Whenever you're ready, no ads. Straight through.
All right, let me. It's been a little nutty this week. Let me get my head on straight. All right, I got a name topic. Well, it's been we have the fall. I know I've talked about this a little bit, but the weather's colder. It's no longer hot here. We're not using the big fans that we had here in Amsterdam, and it's a big. I forget this. Maybe this is last week. I broke out with the house slippers, Brandon. You know, there's this transition you go through where you can, and in Texas, it's a lot longer, but you can walk around barefoot, right? Because like your feet don't get cold. And then you, at some point, you're going to need to wear house slippers, even in Texas, because your feet are just going to be cold all the time and you need house slippers. Now, in a single story house or a house in which the stairs are covered in carpet, very American style house, you might be able to get away with wearing socks for a while. Right, but in my house we have 3 stories, and they're slippery. They're Dutch staircases, so like you basically will kill yourself. And so you can't wear socks because also you're carrying a baby around and you don't want to slip, so forth and so on. So you got to bust out the house slippers. And I found these slippers that Kim bought for me in New Zealand. They're pretty intense. They've got actual sheep skin in them. And they actually have like this tread that I think has more of a sole on the bottom of the shoe than most dress shoes that do. But they're very warm. And all I want to say, this is a tip, is when we bought these shoes, they were a little too big. I would wear them and they would slide around, but that's because I wore them without socks. And one day, last week, I put them on with socks on, and they're snug. They fit really well. So that's my what do you call it? Your PSA, my message, my public service announcement. As it's getting colder, if you have some house shoes that you think don't fit well because they're big, try them with socks on, and I think your feet will be pleased.
All right, a couple quick things for the audience here. One, for those listening, probably didn't see it because it's audio, not a visual platform or visual medium. But like, hey, you've gone with like the 3/4 high top kind of style, or I guess length. So I think you got to go there. And then it's like, what about your, for lack of a better word, do you have a strong opinion on the fur, the filling, the like, is that like the high end like sheepskin, or is that synthetic? Yeah. Does it not matter? Like, where do you come down on that?
I mean, you know, we could have a whole discussion about not only veganism but also sustainability or whatever. But like, right. I think you're going to start with the assumption that you're going to have genuine sheepskin, right? Now, I don't know. It could be ram skin. Maybe it's Icelandic sheep. I don't know. These are from New Zealand, so it's New Zealand sheep, right? But you want to have like the real. You always want to have the local, real flavor, right? So that's why I have the 2 Icelandic, sweaters that are made out of Icelandic sheep. Excellent. I go to Ireland, you buy the Irish sweater made out of Irish sheep, so forth and so on, right? But yeah, you definitely are going to want the fur in there. I have another pair of house shoes that also have sheep, the sheep fur in there, which is also great. But yep, you want real stuff in there.
All right. Well, I just throw it out to all the listeners here because I've definitely sent some stickers to all of those parts of the world. And I feel like New Zealand, I mean, if this is the wheelhouse for New Zealand, I feel like this is it. Like, feels like they would have the best slippers. So someone from New Zealand could recommend what they buy in New Zealand. Let me know. Send it to me at questions@softwaredefinedtalk.com or in the Slack. Just put it in there and I'll tell everyone, because that seems like if we got to go, core competency here, sheep, New Zealand slippers. That feels like they own that market. Like you're not coming to Texas for that, right? You're not coming to Texas for anything related to that. So please send it to us and we'll do a little public service announcement for everybody about here's the slippers you want.
Now to close this topic out before we get to the computer stuff, I have been looking for what I would really like to get, and don't tell Kim this because she's opposed to the Levi's jean jacket for me, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I want to get one day the Levi's jean jacket with the actual sheepskin inside of it, right? It's very easy to acquire the fake sheepskin. Just that's everywhere. But I mean, I'm almost to the point where I feel like I'm going to have to just buy, maybe I go to IKEA and buy that sheepskin thing that they have, and I just go to a tailor and I'm like, can you put this in here? But you've got to get that, whatever that style of sheepskin is that isn't like hair, but it's like the little like compressed, nubby things. But that's really what I need. That's what I want for Christmas, Brandon, or the holidays. And I feel like once I have that, I'm just a fax machine away from my ideal lifestyle.
All right. Well, Cote, I hope it happens for you. I think you'll be great. You'll rock that well.
Now, speaking of getting to the point where you can afford a genuine, maybe even vintage Levi trucker jacket with sheepskin in it, that you can build up enough wealth to only communicate with the world through a fax machine. It looks like you and I, Brandon, are doing great because we're in the IT industry, because there's this major, I think, now I'm going to put, I used to think it was over 10 years, but I'm going to put this out to 20, 30 years. We've got this major transition from on-premises private cloud to public cloud, right? And as we know, anyone who has studied economics or business knows that the primary way to make money is when things shift from point A to point B. Not to go all patriot on you here, but like it's the movement of things between point A and point B where money is made, right? Because once they get to one place or another, it's paid for already, but you pay for moving. And so there's this huge movement of workloads, IT, from on-premises to public cloud. And, to break out of my little jokey thing here, I'm not really sure how seriously we're supposed to take this, but there was a comment that I have not verified beyond the short article that I read from the AWS CEO. We'll put a footnote here of why it's called a CEO at some point, which we've probably discussed in the past, but that's fine. That his feeling was that we're only 10% into this movement between on-premises and public cloud at this point, which is to say 90% of IT is on-premises, which I feel like that'd be amazing, right? Like that all of us in the entire industry would be set up so well if that was the case. But so breaking out of my little corny thing there, I actually do want the Levi's trucker jacket with the sheepskin in there. That wasn't a joke. But like, what do we make of this, Brandon? Is that in any way accurate?
Well, I think we'll get to that question in a second. I think let's start with kind of the meta point around this. So Adam Selipsky, who's obviously took over for Andy Jassy, he's now the CEO of AWS. So typically in the past, like what Jassy would typically say, the last time he gave a keynote, I'd have to someone can fact check it, but he would say something around 4 or 5%, right? Is in the public cloud. So 2 years later, and of course, this is on Mad Money, where all your in-depth analysis of everything happens, right? So like we have to to your point, it's just a talking point. But as we were maybe discussing kind of off air, and maybe this will make it into the after show, right? It's like media training. I think AWS is pretty savvy at media training, so I don't think he just said 10% without thinking, without it's 10%, right? So there has definitely been, so in the last 2 years, if we go back and we were really to just use the AWS public talking points, like in the last 2 years, it's gone up 5% is what I'm going to say between the Jassy comment and this comment. So I think that in itself is very interesting, right? Like that would indicate a tremendous increase in the growth rate of migrations or workloads being born in the public cloud. So I don't really think we can say in the last 2 years we've seen double the adoption of the cloud. I don't think you could actually say that happened. So I think it's interesting more as a talking point, because to kind of your original question is is this accurate? And it's listen, I look at all of these surveys just like you. I think because this is literally the question we're all trying to answer. It's okay, how much of the existing infrastructure and workloads exist today, and what percent of that is eligible to move to anything, to a new platform, whether it be Tanzu or Kubernetes, whether it be from a data center to Azure, AWS, GCP, whatever. The entire industry is trying to figure that out. So I don't know, if it can even be figured out as to what, how far we really are. And I think that's important, because what I keep coming back to is this idea that people kind of keep putting in the mind, like if someone says, hey, we're only 10% of the way there, that the next 90% is going to come, right? And I think maybe that is the trap we're all like kind of like falling into, is like, no, there may not, like there may be some percentage of this that never moves, right? And we can go into like why that may be the case. So maybe it's only like, I don't know, like maybe it's 30% never moves, maybe it's 40% never moves. And I think from a financial standpoint, from an AWS standpoint, there is clearly an advantage from a stock market valuation to have the world believe, as Jeff Bezos wrote in his 2014 annual letter, that he says, quote, I believe AWS market size is unconstrained, end quote, right? So if you are selling stock in a company, like you can have no greater statement than you're selling into a market that has no constraint on its upside, right? And it's like, of course there's a constraint. Of course there's some upper limit, right? So I think, we gotta kind of think about both the messenger and the message here. And then the final comment on this whole thing is like, well, after 18 years, since AWS has been launched, like we'll just take the facts as they are laid out, we're 10% there. So it's like, okay, so in another 18 years, do we think it's going to be another 10% or another 30%? Or like, is there going to be this massive growth rate? Because that kind of all plays into this of like what the AWS, if you will, total addressable market is.
I know you are a close follower of the reInvent keynotes, and I didn't even think that what we should do is we should pull together a chart that has those numbers in it, right? And I think if you go all the way back to I forget, S3 came out before EC2, right? If I remember, like whichever one it is, I don't know. S3 was released in 2006, so like you were saying, that's right. 16, 17, however many years, and I feel like, I mean, you could do a chart based just on those numbers, and you could start to adjust what the growth rate was and project out and things like that, and that would be. I think I would be satisfied with those numbers. That would be good. Like, I don't know if they would necessarily be true, but they would be like good guidance. And then also, a little bit what you're saying is, well, not a little bit. Two other things you're saying that I think are important to keep in mind is, one, how many things can actually be moved to the public cloud? That's a big unknown, right? Because it's a moving target of just like, well, it depends. And then two, there's also, like, as always, there is the rate at which things are changing, which becomes important. But yeah, I think that would be great to go back and I will never do this, but to find the number in all the annual keynotes and see what it is. But
also, I think we always want to pair this though with like, and this is why I think it's so important to like focus in on who's saying it, right? Is that like, as we always say, like, what is valuation of a company? A valuation is just today's revenue or earnings multiplied by some story, right? By some, you come up with a story and then you come up with some multiple. You say, and if the story's big, you say, this is just the beginning, and I want a 30 times multiple, 30 times revenue, or 50 times earnings, whatever. And I think, I think some interesting kind of, if you will, like a cold take on Amazon, right? Would be like kind of, I'm not saying this is true, but I'm just saying you can come at it this way and say, okay, Amazon today is worth over $1 trillion. Okay, so Cote, if I just said to you right now, okay, give me $1 trillion and I'm going to give you Amazon, right? How long would it take for you to get your money back? I'm talking about profit there, right?
Right.
Like, could you, because that's ultimately what we're trying to do, right? And so if you want to have this massive market cap, like you got to believe that, like, yeah, I could get $1 trillion back at this over some reasonable amount of time. It can't be 300 years, right? It has to be like, maybe it's 10 years, maybe it's 20 years, whatever. And so if you kind of came at it and said, okay, well, what are some anti, takes on that? Would be like, well, one, like the retail business, which is Amazon in a sort of, if you will, is so synonymous with, is like, maybe that is always going to be a very, very low margin business, right? That, if you will, this idea that you win market share and eventually you just flip the levers and you make more money, that day may never come. Like, it just may get, if you will, the margin stays smaller and smaller and smaller. And even though you're getting more revenue through it, it continuously stays small. So that would argue that that's not a high multiple business, right? What would you do to combat that though? Be like, well, I'm generating tons and tons of revenue, but like, what would I like to have to go with it? A really profitable business. What would that be? That could be AWS. And what would I like to have in my really profitable business? A quote unquote unconstrained market cap, because it just means like,
Absolutely.
hey, it doesn't even matter if the retail business doesn't throw off that much cash, because we're actually, making all this money from this other thing. But if you say to yourself, well, no, it's not unconstrained, it's only going to be like, let's be more pessimistic, only 50% of today's workloads were even eligible to really ever run in the public cloud, then suddenly you have a much more compressed looking thing, right? And you say, okay, for the next 20 years, maybe AWS gets a lot of those workloads, but at the same time, maybe there's some technological changes and new competitors that even eat away at that, right? So, I'm not saying, again, I'm just kind of throwing those out as like straw takes, if you will, for people to throw darts at, to just mix like a bunch of different metaphors. But the idea is just like, hey, okay, well, let's just think about who's saying it and think about like what their motivation is, and then now let's then have a conversation about like which workloads and how many workloads can move to the cloud.
Yeah, you got to tamp down the TAM talk. That's that for your story modifier there. Like TAMs are a trap if you're trying to figure that out. But that's good. I think I'm gonna walk away from this or sit here away from it, and I don't know.
What do you think? I want to just give me. I want to set you up for like a little hot take if you want to if you want to lean in. It's like, I don't know, like how many workloads today, if we say it's 100%, like how many do you think can really be of that 100% could really be moved to the cloud? And when I say that, not like if we deployed the greatest technology team of all time, they could go in and like find a way to move this workload to a thing. It's more around like, okay, given all the current customers and what people are doing, if you will, the average team, given average resources, is going to spend the time and effort to move this application to the cloud. Like how, like, what do you think? Like, do you have like your own gut feel? Do you think it's 100%, or are you more pessimistic?
I think so. Okay, so I'll let me force myself to give an answer and then explain it. Like, I think I would wager that 60 to 70% of workloads could run in public cloud. Now, what does that mean? I think the first thing that can't run in public cloud is what we would call edge nowadays, which basically just means like retail stores, like cars and factories, like anything where like you actually need the compute right next to the thing that it's doing, right, or that it has a bad internet connection, right? Like, I guess it's conceivable that you could operate like the floor of a car manufacturing factory from the public cloud, but that seems nutty. Like, I don't know. Nothing seems that good, right? Like,
so we could also just kind of lump some type of real time, low latency.
Yeah. Or it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't even do, it's not even near real time, but just like, let's call it 5 minutes time, right? Like something that you need a 5-minute response time to. We've all experienced streaming. Like, that shit is not what you want to like run your car manufacturing based on. Like, whatever's going on there, like we got, as we have covered extensively over the years, we got the best and the brightest working on streaming, like, the Richie Rich reboot to you every night. And that still doesn't always work perfectly.
Still doesn't work, right?
Yeah. So that, you take out all of that kind of stuff, right? And what that's basically, I guess it's not going to be all of your cash machines, your point of sale stuff, because I think like Stripe and Square are all cloud based, right? I don't know if they run locally, but anyways, you've got a bunch of stuff like that you take off the board, just because like technology.
So do you say like 10%? So 10%, we'll just call it edge, real time, can't be moved.
Yeah.
Too high, too low, right?
Yeah. And then of course, this is a very small percentage, but it's important because it drives a lot of product management decisions, because the following spends a shit ton of money. And that is people with guns, which is to say spies and military people, right? They always want air gapped off the net for very good reasons.
Defense spending of any kind. Yeah.
Right. And so that is, speaking of, what is the quote? Unconstrained. Speaking of unconstrained spending, that's what that market is. Basically. Right. So you're always going to have those people, but percentage of workloads wise, it's a pretty small amount, but you got to take that off the board. And then, so what you're left with is basically, if you're looking at all of IT except for the absurd things, you've got enterprise applications, right? Your ERP systems, and your really boring ERP systems like Workday
Right.
and like your OKR engine. And then, we already have like payroll at ADP, like not on premises. So that's cool. So more or less all that like back office stuff, I think is part of cloud. That's all running in the cloud. Like so that you win that workload. So that's on there. And then you have like, we already have basically most all consumer application in the public cloud, right? Like, so that's done. And then you're basically just left with like the custom written, the stuff I care about. Well, I'm also going to take out like storage, and then maybe we'll come back to like data analytics, which is its own weird thing I don't quite understand. But the bulk of what you're left with is like custom written software. And it all just depends. Like there's a lot of that you could conceivably run in public cloud, and it just comes down to if it's the cheapest, fastest to deploy option for you, right? So like in theory, every single online banking platform out there should run in public cloud, right? Like it's just sort of like, I mean,
this is the whole thing. We have the mainframe. You have the mainframe, the legacy transaction processing.
Right.
Like at some point though, it's like, it's just very hard to get to an ROI number where it doesn't make sense to be like, hey, let's just upgrade the mainframe or buy the latest thing. It's like, so let's consolidate.
I guess maybe the big thing would be like, at what point does MasterCard run in the public cloud? Like that would be like, if you can imagine a world where pretty much all of MasterCard and all that it does runs in the public cloud, then we've achieved maximum cloudage, right? Like
so I want to summarize and be like, okay, 10% we're taking off the board because of what we call it real time or edge computing, right?
Yeah.
I think we're going to do another 2 or 3% is off the board. I'm going to call it defense spending, sovereignty, government. Like there's just some political or financial or kind of geopolitical reason it can't be moved. So that's going to be anywhere from like 1 to 3%. Then I think we throw in something like probably like 7% is just legacy applications where the modernization effort ultimately has negative ROI. Like doing all the work to move it over just would never pay for itself.
Yeah.
Right? And the fact that like you will probably make mistakes when you move it over, so you cause all these problems and it won't work. So I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like it's interesting because we're probably way off because we kind of agree, which is always a sign of maybe bad of
genius.
Of group think, but like maybe 20% of the workloads are just not, what I'm just going to say, they're just off the board. So if we kind of like net it all out, then it's like, okay, 20% never move for all the reasons we outlined. We've already moved 10%, right? So it leaves us like, okay, there's still a lot of money left. Still 70% is left to go. Probably 40%, 50% of that group is like relatively easy to move, but that part of the market's going away pretty fast because if it's easy, it's getting done. And then you're going to be left with like, man, we got maybe 30% here that we should move, but like we got a lot of hard work. Like we got a lot of backbreaking modernization work to go, and it's not going to be easy.
And I mean, mainframes and transactions and all of that, but I don't know how like automated ad buying online works. But my understanding is it's pretty sophisticated, and it has to be transaction driven, right? Because you've got like all of a sudden to like pop up an ad in Facebook or whatever. Like it's done by like these total automated auctions or whatever, right? And so you've got multiple parties probably in sub 60-second periods like bidding to place an ad somewhere after analyzing a big stream of text. And then you've got to do a transaction of like, you get the ad and you're going to give me your money, right? Like, I mean, that's kind of vital to the whole business of advertising. And so like, that sounds like every single other transactionally important type of business ever, right? And so like if you can do that for like real-time-ish auctions of ads for like buy this belt buckle, like you could do that for everything else.
So of course, like I think the question you're answering is like, could it be done, and do we have like a technical solutions to similar problems? Yes and yes. Now the question then, who is motivated to take a large legacy system that is maybe not perfect, but running, but it's also the backbone to your point about, you're using MasterCard, right? Works really well. You run your credit card, it works 99.9% of the time.
I think you figured out, Brandon.
Who is the person that's walking in, just to finish the thought, who's the person that's like, you know what I want to do? I want to rip all this out and I want to move it over. And at the end of that, you know what they're going to get? Nothing. They're going to get no one is going to be excited that they did this at MasterCard. Maybe they get a keynote at a cloud provider, but they don't get billions of dollars. The people that want to do that are at Stripe, right? They're going to build something completely new to the side. So that's why you kind of end up with like, hey, there isn't significant motivation for a person to walk in and be like, I'm going to do it. Just like this is, I keep saying, you know, I like to use the IRS. This is why the IRS has like, you know, tens of millions of tax returns just sitting there. No one is like, I'm going to get this done and make billions of dollars, even though it's probably worth billions of dollars to the United States, you know, taxpayers one way or the other. And so, you know, that's the part you have to really become one with and be like, that is why certain applications are not going to move. And it's not a technology question. It's
I think
Antenna's problem.
You're right. It's a floppy disk problem. That's the issue that we have.
It is a floppy. That's well said. It is a floppy disk problem.
Yeah. Well, I think the answer is Amazon needs to buy MasterCard, and then our whole. That's the way. I mean, that's the way that you win any complicated argument. Is you're just like, premise number 37 destroyed. And that recontextualizes everything. That would be an exciting antitrust showdown everywhere. That'd be fantastic. I don't know if that would work out, but wouldn't that be amazing? Like Amazon owns MasterCard, and then all of a sudden, through a bunch of like story stuff, that becomes public cloud, and then boom, you're done. The whole framing changes, and everything's cool. And they would have access to their data centers and their pipes. I'm sure MasterCard has super impressive global cloud stuff. Although, you know what would be impressive is if I could pay for my groceries at Albert Heijn with my MasterCard instead of their local brand for debit cards, their Maestro, which is totally fine. But you get no points with Maestro, only with MasterCard. Well, you know, when it comes to figuring out if 90% is on premise or it's more like 30%, I'm looking forward to what I'm thinking of in a only a complimentary way of the hearing from the Andy Rooney of Software Defined Talk podcast. On Sunday, I want Grace Lee to give us some commentary on this, to kind of go over his take on what this 10% number is all about, if that's real or not. I'll always enjoy that stuff there. Except that one episode where he talked about Kurt Cobain, and he just kind of missed what was going on there. That was too bad. So, related, there as another big cloud thing, it looks like I think there has been a good collection of Google further becoming a normal company. Now, you know, I always joked, or I always like to joke that whenever I hear people talking about whenever in the tech world someone says it's time for someone to switch to being a wartime CEO, I rewrite that as meaning like time to become a CEO. Which is to say, just a normal CEO who's
focused on earnings. That's what that means.
Right. That's right.
That's usually what that means.
And you know, I was reading through it. It looks like, as always, Brandon, you can fill in the exact things here, but it looks like there is some feeling that the growth rates at Amazon are not good enough. They're still astonishing.
Google,
at Google.
At Google in this case, but go on.
Yeah. They're still astonishing. They're doing very well, but they're not quite as good as they need to be. And so maybe we need to focus a little bit more on our productivity, our operation stuff. And the number was thrown out. This is a pretty good number that we need to up it by 20%, the efficiency. And I like the quote that was cited here that their CEO is going over. Is like, you know, sometimes we find ourselves in a meeting where there's 3 people, and it's kind of inefficient. You know, it takes 3 people to make a decision. And this goes back to like, well, sounds like for a company of your age, you know, 23, 25 years old, you're right up there. You're not only meeting, but maybe even because you're so profitable, exceeding expectations. Because I feel like, and I know this is snarky, but if you only have 3 people that you're blocking on to make a decision, you're probably operating better than maybe like 99% of other organizations in existence.
Right. No, I think that's probably a very aspirational statement by him about like, yeah, if it's only 3 people, it's probably a lot more. But I do think, you know, we talked a lot about last week about Amazon's. They have a whole unit devoted to, I think we're going to use your phrase, you know, you're the one sort of pushing developer toil, right? Like just like, well, how long does it take to do stuff? And so we talked about that one last week, but I do think Google wins the branding of this better. They have the quote, Simplicity Sprint, end quote. So great. Love the alliteration. You know, that's something I love. It's simple to remember. So, and to your point, the goal is in their case 20%. So I think you're the one. I think you were talking about this last week. It's like I think AWS or Amazon was saying 30%, but here they are. These are like the best of the best, right? And these companies are publicly coming out saying like we need to find, or if you will, reduce developer toil, to kind of lean into your previous webinar, which I'm sure you can link to. They're identifying somewhere between 20 and 30% themselves, and this is the best of the best. So I do think it's like this is maybe a group therapy podcast for all of us. It's like, well, hey, if the best of the best is still at 20 or 30%, like you shouldn't feel so distraught that maybe you're not as, you don't have everything 100% automated in your company and like people are frustrated. It's like, it just shows you how difficult developer toll is to address.
Yeah. It's another thing that smells of like freshly printed floppy disks, right? Where it's like there's often reasons why you need those 3 people in the room, and you've got to do some sort of business case that kind of goes through like, well, is it worth spending the time to figure out having only 2 people, or is it just sort of like, I don't know, things are fine? And I guess that's kind of what gets revealed when a highly profitable, successful company like this kind of starts to talk about productivity, is like you do start to find that line of like, we would like to get back into the zone of absurd amounts of money instead of where we are. So finally, we can tack back to doing things. But
now someone in the Slack brought this up, and I'd love to get your take, Cote, because you've done a lot of thinking about this. Is that their whole point was that like addressing it sometimes is actually easier than just figuring out like where is the toil, if you will. It's like what are the areas in your, let's just call it in this case, in development of software, that really are taking the most time. Like that in itself is not obvious, right? Even though it may take too long, and that you may know anecdotally, and I think this is what they were saying in AWS, it's like too much quote unquote button clicking, right? You're like, oh, I'm just stuck in the console and I'm just clicking buttons, I'm not developing. But that's sort of like, while you may know that instinctively, it's like, well, which, you know what I mean? Like, which buttons are you clicking? What are you configuring, right? And then you may have one conversation and it's like, well, it takes a while to set up, the load balancers. And it's like, well, what are you saying there? Like, we don't want the load balancing, or load balancing is a complicated thing. And so, and I think just that whole idea that like, this is probably something where the quote unquote bias for action, at least the action of like reducing the amount of time, probably works against like actually, like, does everyone actually ever say like, hey, we need a bias for understanding? Like we need to actually understand end why it takes so long and where the real bottlenecks are, because if we never do that, we probably just end up solving really small problems that are isolated, that don't necessarily take up much time. And so maybe that's the next level that the Simplicity Sprint or the AWS builders units are trying to do. It's like you need someone to do like actual user research on what's taking so long.
Yeah, well, I think that's where the whole like, lean manufacturing stuff comes in, is like part of the virtuous cycle of having a learning culture in place is that you're constantly asking the questions you're asking, Brandon. Not that you're asking, but that you're talking about asking. And that just like any habit, once you put this habit in place of saying like, why are there 3 people in the room? It's something that becomes more efficient to do because you're doing it all the time without also having a meeting with 3 people to figure out why you're having a meeting with 3 people, right? Like kind of like right. in the best of all possible things, it's like why something like Amazon's 69 principles, or 68, 72, how many they have at this point, like why they are handy, because it just becomes like second nature to do it, and you can just kind of fall back to it to be like, oh, principle 53 says that like, when we come to a meeting, we should do the following. And so you don't have to like, I don't know, you don't have to like think about how to think about it. And so, with all of the lean learning stuff, like you're constantly like evaluating if there is a better way to do something. It doesn't take, you don't have to launch the initiative for improvement. It's like that initiative always exists now.
Right. Like you've kind of built it into the system. Yeah.
Right. And so, that is a good, I think it's a very hard thing to introduce that kind of thinking into an organization. And this might be for all the like over the years, like sort of like looking askance at like culture things. Like that might be kind of a good indicator of a sustainable corporate culture when they make an almost nauseatingly big deal out of always learning and exploring stuff, right? And when there's some proof of it, that there's kind of reaction to it and doing things. Because ultimately, for a multi-decade long company, that's what they're going to face, especially in technology. Now, somewhat related, as you were going over that, you were making me realize, and I always forget this, like whenever there's a discussion of like Google and Facebook and these other companies, I should always be cautious when we get obsessed about talking about the developers and like how they need to improve and do better. Because like, well, how about the people selling ads? Like, I mean, like Google's core business is, I think, the money they get from Apple for being the default. No, that's the other way around. They pay Apple a ton of money, right, to be the default search thing.
Search engine, yeah.
And then like most of their money comes from advertising, right?
AdWords,
and so,
yep.
So it's sort of like, are there not like people who are sort of like, you know, your Don Draper, the types of people Don Draper would talk with, who are like buying ads and selling the ads?
No, they have a huge office in New York City. They have a lot of people selling ads.
And so it's sort of like, hopefully the developers are kind of like, I mean, sure, I could be more efficient, but like maybe could you go sell some more fucking ads? Right? Like, so it's, and granted, these comments were like at the coding conference and things like that, but it always makes me curious, like, so what is the deal with like the business side, right? Never mind like what the, you know, the developers are up to and how they could improve, but like, are there like what, and this doesn't get talked about very much, but like, I wonder what the innovation is for like, all right, Google, you know, ad salesperson, you're going to cold call someone. Like, what's that technology like, right? Or like when you're sending out like the email, like what is, if we think about like in the same way that these advertising driven tech companies are like, and Amazon's a little more transparent, or you can see a little bit more about how Amazon's business actually functions. But like, what is the innovation they're doing in advertising selling, right? Because that would seem to be like the basis of what they have. Like, you can always get your developers to like, I don't know, do real-time auctions better, or maybe you can't, maybe that's an issue, but then you also need to like run your ad business a lot better. And that would be fun to hear. Do they have a conference about that? Like how to sell ads better, Google?
I think, you know, as I mentioned last week, I read this YouTube book and I thought it was interesting. A couple bigger things from Google came out of it. And so maybe this kind of back to your cultural point. So maybe it's a little, I'll ask you a couple questions, Cote, but we'll also kind of like throw it out to the audience. Maybe they can confirm or deny this. So one of the things in the YouTube book they talk a lot about is that, I guess, a cultural term that Google uses, like when they're talking about problems. And maybe someone proposes what you just said, is like, why don't we have a team just do a lot more inside sales and phone calls, right? And so what potentially I think a Google person would say to you, or a Google cultural thing would be like, Cote, it doesn't sound very Googly, right? It's not like you're not using like a lot of data and creating some automated system, right, to solve this big problem that scales. Because most of the time, like, you know, the ad buying is really this online auction that's all done through computers. And once you've kind of signed up the big advertisers, they're not really buying, you know, it's not like a person is buying. It's like sort of like the systems are doing it, right? So I'm interested in, one is like, this is what I'm always kind of interested in a lot of these books. Like, I don't know, like this was written in a book that was well reported about YouTube, and that's this term Googly, like people will use it as a reminder to kind of reinforce the culture, just like at AWS. And I think we have a lot of evidence that AWS does use the terms. Like they'll say, people that work at AWS will say it's the day one. They'll reference that a lot. So that is they use that cultural touchstone a lot. I believe that they write 6-page memos. So these aren't things they just talk about, they do. So I'm interested is like, do the people that the Googlers working at Google, do they actually use that term Googly or have some type of cultural touchstone that they use when they say it? So if you can confirm that, I'd love for someone to say like, yeah, no, that's exactly right. Or they'll just say that the person that wrote the YouTube book, like he sort of bought into some kind of narrative that some executive was selling and it really wasn't ultimately, true. So that's one thing. And the other thing from a cultural standpoint that this book referenced, and I would love for someone to confirm this, is that Google, which I don't know if Google invented the OKRs. Like I think it came out of them. I don't know.
It's from like Intel or something, right?
Right. But the thing that I read in the book that they mentioned is that the OKR, so I guess the results part of it, the R part, is somehow, I guess that metric is posted next to your name inside the Google online directory. So Cote, like, I don't know what your R would be, but like if we went to the directory, I could see like, this is your objective, and here's the graph that's showing whether or not you're meeting it. And I was like, wow, sounds interesting. Like, I don't know. I could see a lot of ways. Like, one, I'm just like, what curious of like, does that really happen? Because that in itself is interesting. Someone actually took the time to write measurable results and has a way to track it. Like, wow, I don't know, just interesting. Like, to me, kind of interesting. And then two, it's like, wow, if it does, it could seem like it would have potentially a lot of all incentives that work the wrong way, but maybe that's okay. Maybe at least you'd have incentives and you could kind of constantly adjust it. And so kind of back to your advertising thing, that's what Google seems to be doing a lot, is like they sort of create these big systems with, if you will, different incentives, and then they kind of reweight the incentives to create new behavior. So that would be sort of like the Google way of managing a company. So I wonder, so I'm just throwing it open. I don't know, Google, I don't know if you personally, Cote, can tell me if either one of those things are factually correct, but if anyone that's worked at Google or has experience with Google wants to tell me like, oh, that's actually true, anything I said was true, or maybe that was just a made up narrative. And you know what they're doing? Maybe they're stuck in Workday like the rest of us, just with those stupid text boxes being like, got to write something in here now for a goal, right? Got to figure it out, right? So I'm really fascinated to know if that's the case, because it is sort of like an interesting, different way to manage a culture than I think AWS, for example. It's sort of like we don't hear that kind of stuff at AWS. We hear more the brute force, make the phone calls, to your point.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like maybe I have so many doubts about the following, but I think we should have arrived at this point in the corporate world of humanity that like you can't publish numbers on people. Like that seems like maybe we need like the DevOps 5.0 community to really nail this one. You had the automation, you had whatnot, the like all the other stuff, observability, but they should really kind of sort out like, according to the 2024 DevOps report, organizations that associate a performance number with people are failures. I think maybe in the new edition of Accelerate, they can work on that, because it seems like, I don't know, it doesn't seem like that works long term. Or I could be totally wrong, but someone should make a ruling on that finally, right? Because you can bring in your Dimming and the other guy, like you can bring all these people to kind of like do some sort of like Mortal Kombat style battle between we should use metrics and numbers to evaluate individuals versus we should not. And
well, like, I don't know, take something simple. Like, I don't know, should a salesperson be measured against the quota? Like, that's probably the most well-known metric out there. Like, what do you think? I don't know. Is it good? Is it good? Is it bad?
Yeah, no, it's and then there's other models where like we're that essentially are like we just paid the salespeople a normal salary.
Yeah. And then it just worked. Yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of like one of those weird, like, has anyone run like the A/B tests? And I guess you could call it like account management. Sometimes they just refer to that as account management versus like a salesperson. Like if you're account manager, sort of like you're just, call them up, make sure they're happy, pay a good salary, but you're not like pushing someone every month to like close a new deal, right? Does that ultimately make more money than, but I do think, I don't know, like this is why I'm just fascinated, like if it actually exists. Cause I'm like, part of me is like, wow, that would be some incredible clarity. If like you came in, and I kind of think about this, like, I bet you have this for your own job. It's like, especially when you're working in kind of these white collar jobs, like you kind of create your own little dashboard. Like, do you kind of like keep track of the stuff you're working on? And like, maybe for you, it's like the events and things like you kind of want to track like, oh, I did this piece of content or I did this. And so everybody, I think, kind of creates their own thing. And I was like, wow, it'd be interesting if I walked into a job on my first day and I clicked on my name and then they showed me a graph of like, okay, here's the things we're tracking for you. And they're like, and you could like see it. And I'd be like, part of me is like, that would be good. But then part of me would be like, like if I don't feel like I had control over that, would I just be like, oh, I'm just like just a constant form of stress? Like the one that they talked about in the YouTube book was like, they were trying to get to like, I don't know, so many like billions of views or something, or, like some kind of revenue number. I was like, wow, that would be hard every day to like see that and be like, are we working towards it? But maybe that at the same time, maybe that's the way that you stay focused in on it. Right. So,
right. No, I think that's a good example. Cause it's sort of like if you, I don't know the numbers, but let's say you had, let's put it another way. Let's say you're a gigantic bank that has like, I don't know, at least $1 trillion in holdings and like however many untold billions in revenue a year, right? And the corporate goal, instead of billions of views, is like, we need to increase this month's revenue by $1 billion. And then it's like, out of your 10 to 20,000 software developers, someone goes to Brandon and they're like, here's a dashboard.
Right.
It has that $1 billion on there. And you're just like, cool. Like,
but the one they would have, okay, so the dashboard developers would probably get would be Jira, right? They'd probably have a certain amount of tickets and then have story points, and then you could basically pull from Jira, be like, okay, how many stories did you close? How many tickets did you close?
Right.
That's what they're doing today, right? Developers, I think, or anyway, the Scrum Masters, all of them, like they're all tracking that, but like nobody. I'd say rarely do people like tie it to specific performance. Like if you do this, it's better.
Yeah.
Because there's always extenuating circumstances. They're like, well, it turns out the story we assigned was like impossible, right? And or vice versa. It's like this person's killing it because they're just making like cosmetic changes to the website that only take a few minutes. So that's where you get into all the incentives. It's like, well, who's going to take on a hard project that could almost be unknown whether or not it's going to work, right?
Right. And that goes.
I want to change the colors. I want to do the rebranding. You just want to do like the quick tickets, right? And then of course you may be like, well, we're going to disincentivize that. Be like, I'm only going to give you credit for big stories. Then it's like, well, no one ever fixes the small things, And so
that's true.
So you kind of quickly it quickly moves where like these dashboards, I think, would quickly become a weapon in both directions, right? Product management's the same thing. It's like you should be talking to more customers. Suddenly, everyone's talking to customers. No one's actually writing requirements, right? Or vice versa, right? Like, hey, you got to put out a requirements document once a week. It's like, well, suddenly you're doing no market research. So you always get into problems when you get into these OKRs, right? You're like, you're taking away some, if you will, an intelligent person to be like, I'm going to figure out what's most important. But at the same time, maybe that's okay. Right. I don't, I'm kind of arguing at every side of it. So I realize I have no real position. That's why I'm like, I just want somebody to tell me like, hey, does it work at Google? Are people happy with it? Because maybe we should adopt this.
Well, I think I have three things, and then maybe we can move on to the bureaucracy. One is like, I think there's two things I think that, to use this phrase a third time, over the years, we get fascinated with these tech companies. One is when they are just like on that rocket ship and going crazy and saying all sorts of stuff, right? And we're just like, that sounds great for all the money that you're making. Good people on rocket ships say all sorts of stuff, right? And then eventually the rocket ship sort of like starts to sputter, and like they might have achieved like some great orbital pattern, but they're starting to stress out a little bit. And I think at that point, that's when like it becomes super useful to look at them, because it kind of road tests out like their theories of why they were successful and what was going on. Is they not so much like, no one really wants them to like fail or whatever, but you can like, it's kind of like a renewal of how useful is like this culture and this way of thinking for sustaining a business and also fixing the business that you're in, evolving, right? And I think this is one of the reasons why people admire the strategy and business side of Amazon so much, because like it seems to be working, right? Like, they famously, they were like, this Fire phone, boy, we sure did love that, but it's gone, right? So like they like, and to a certain extent, Google does that too for inscrutable reasons. They just get rid of stuff. But so one, there's that. Like it's really fascinating as companies struggle, is one way of putting it, but as they strive to succeed when the headwinds come in, like that's very instructive. Now, two, I think you identified one of the things that like must be crazy for salespeople, like when they get sent on like this suicide mission, and they're like, your job is to get $5 million this year out of this company that in no way wants to work with us. And I just like, I can never imagine like the mentality of a salesperson who's just like, oh, okay. Right. Like
do it. Right. Start making the phone calls. Yeah.
And it's also like in moments like that, that's when you like, it's like, trying to sell like, a glass of water to a fish. It's just like, what kind of strategic direction are you giving people? Now, third, I think you probably know like what business term, book term this is, or bias, but I almost feel like when it comes to metrics, having experienced lots of different ways of doing metrics, and I mean, I'm lucky in the situation I am in my entire career with metrics, but like, I feel like if I was given a set of metrics to succeed at, to the point of the salesperson, that were accurate and good, it would show like such an understanding from management at the organization that you wouldn't actually need the metrics, ironically.
Yeah.
Right? Like figuring out what metrics you would use to track things. At some point, if you do it well enough, you don't really need the metrics because you understand how the business functions. You understand like how you're going to grow the business. You understand like what you might do to grow the business. And so the better the metrics, the less you need them. I think might be.
Yeah. No, you're right, because I think the work of understanding the business at that level would give you such such knowledge that you're going to succeed regardless. And I think that to me is why I think it's so kind of like fascinating to think about doing this, right? Or, if you got to that level, you really would understand all the things in your business. And imagine, like, just hypothetically, imagine this: if someone offered you a job, be like, "Hey, coach, I want you to do this," and they actually sent you like not the job description, but they actually sent you like the blank dashboard. Okay, yep, this is what we're doing. And like, here's your dashboard you're going to be measured against. And here's like the numbers you have to hit. And here's like, doing a good job. Here's doing a great job. Here's doing an excellent job. Like, wow, that would be incredible. Like you would have everything you need to know about like, do I want to take this job? Because you would do the calculus. You'd be like, I know I have a really good idea about how I will hit these metrics. And if they were like, way off and you had the ability to select different jobs, you just be like, no, I don't want to do that. Right. So it's kind of like but like no one ever does that in an interview, right? In an interview that, you're going to get like a million questions about yourself. Tell me a time that you did this, this, and this. But like, if you just said to like them, it's like, yeah, send me the dashboard that this position's measured against and send me the metrics that I'll be judged against. I think you're probably not going to get that. Right. I think they'd probably be like, you're not going to make it here. Like, you're too rigid, right? That would probably be the response. Would be like, you're too rigid. That's not how it works. It's like, well, I mean, why not? Like, why not ask for that, right? You have a dashboard for everything else, like, and then, so I don't know. I think it's a fascinating thing to do. I don't think it can be done though, right? And I think maybe we'll end on this, like something to kind of give us all hope, right? There's a study that was released that we didn't mention. I think I put it in last week's show notes. It said that the number one indicative thing about becoming a successful venture capitalist is to, in your first few investments, make an incredibly successful investment. So like, invest in Google first, because then once you've done that, it's statistically, you're not likely to find another Google, but you're statistically likely to do well because people will come to you because they know that you were one of the original investors in Google or any high-tech startup. So that is a shorthand for just saying it's just another kind of like halo effect, kind of luck thing. It's like, well, if you invest in the number one thing, you're probably going to have a good career. And to some degree, that's not controllable. And so we'll apply this to Google for a second, because Melissa Mayer and Susan Wojcicki, I don't know how to say her last name, and the CEO of YouTube. So, it just so happens that both of those people were essentially within the first 20 employees. And in fact, Google was actually started out of Susan's garage. She rented it to them. And it just so happens that those two people that they picked went on to become, essentially, billionaires, or at least making hundreds of millions of dollars and becoming CEOs of largely some of the biggest internet companies in the world, that being YouTube and Yahoo. So you can either say that was incredible in their first, 10 hires that they found this much talent, or you could say it just pays to be early. You know what I mean? It's like, if you're the early one, and you can also pick on some other people at Facebook. I think Bosworth, right? Boz, as he's known, was like in the first 10 employees and things like that. So being a first employee at a internet startup that's really successful, that is a great way to be successful going forward. So maybe if we kind of balance it all out, I'd be like, maybe it's not so much about OKRs. Maybe it's about a little bit of luck and also picking the right job and doing a good job at actually that job that you get. But all those things, like, they may not be controllable, right? You may work at some startups that they just don't take off, and you know what? You're just another person that worked at a startup that didn't succeed. There's a lot of us out there.
It's true. It's, the sooner you're successful, the longer you'll have to be successful. I think I think it might have been that John Syracuse, the guy who said, like, the fundamental flaw with my strategy, my career strategy, is I didn't become a millionaire at a younger age. I think is all you got to do is that. Well, speaking of becoming a millionaire at a young age, Brandon, do we have any bureaucracy this week?
We do. I want to thank Felix for writing in. I sent him some stickers in Germany. He's listening through. I think he was also listening through the back catalog. I have several people have said to me, like, so, oh, I've been listening for a long time. They've been listening through a lot of the back catalog. So everyone that's going through the old episodes, I thank you for doing that. I'm always amazed when I hear that. If you'd like a sticker, all you have to do is email your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world. A few other kind of quick things here. One, I just want to say Grafana really kind of, I don't want to say we have a lot of intellectual privacy that we need, property rather, that we need to defend. But I think the SDT thread, right, that we kind of started this. So Grafana has now reported that they have a Slack thread over 10,000 messages. And I'm just like, listen, we clearly started this. We own this. I don't know what they're doing. I'm just gonna imply that they're cheating. That those aren't real messages from real users. They're probably some type of bots that are putting in there. The software-defined talk thread, for those not familiar, was something Matt Ray started several years ago. It is now 7,846 messages deep. But it's all real people talking about kind of one subject or not one subject, depending on how you read it. So I wanted to congratulate everyone in the software defined talk thread. Keep it going. And listen, let's not be discouraged. And Grafana will not win. I just want to say that right now. Grafana, back off our area. And then finally, I just wanted to also say that some people in the Slack, some people comment that they'd like to see how the podcast is made. So if you are such a person that you want to do it, what you can do is you can watch this live recording on Twitch or YouTube, or if after the fact, all of, if you will, the background of recording, if it's interesting to you, is available on YouTube. If you will, that's our bootleg feed. It's not really a bootleg because it's available publicly, but it has no editing. It just has whatever we say comes out. Whereas, believe it or not, the podcast is edited. Sometimes people ask that, yes, there is editing in the podcast, which maybe that is hard to believe. But if for some reason you wanted to see behind the scenes, I just know we haven't mentioned in a long time, you can go to the YouTube channel. I'll put a link in this specific show notes. That's always there, but I'll actually put a link to this specific video if you want to check it out, if that's interesting to you. I know some people like to see behind the scenes, and it's fine. If that's not your thing, if you're not interested in it, I totally get it. You don't have to watch it, but just wanted to let you know it's available. And then we do record if you want to get in and watch it live with us. We do watch the chat. We try to answer some questions, and we usually do that on Twitch. So, all right. So that's a lot of us promoting ourselves, Cote. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, I'm sure you're going to do some detailed editing of all my pen clicking that I was going to do. You're going to go word for word where I pause, take that out. It'll be great.
Yeah, I guess we should. Maybe we'll reveal. Like sometimes, like I don't know if people want to see it, but sometimes I guess it is like if there is someone producing the show, I guess it's me. So sometimes it's like me, sort of like either suggesting, berating, making fun of Matt and Cote for not doing the right thing or something like that. So yeah, I don't know if that's interesting. Hopefully, it's all in good fun. I don't think anyone, Matt or Cote, I don't think you take any offense to it. But that's what you see in the YouTube channel. If that's your interest level.
That's right. Well, there's several conferences coming up, not least of which is my favorite conference of the year, Spring One, which is coming up December 6th and 8th. There'll be a lot of software development stuff there, DevOpsy things, all this cloud business. But if you go to spring1.io, you can check it out. And if you use the discount code COTE200, you can get $200 off registering. There's also KubeCon North America coming up October 24th and 28th. There is the, they have their EU one, I think in March, I heard, which maybe we'll have to check into that as well. And then finally, in October 13th, there's going to be the Sydney Cloud FinOps meetup that Matt Ray will be presenting at. So you should check that out if you're in Sydney or, basically anywhere in Australia. It's just a few hours drive to get to Sydney, is my understanding. It might be longer if you're coming from New Zealand, but you should go check that out. And with that, Brandon, what do you have to recommend this week?
This one is a tip that I think everyone probably knows, but I'm going to give it out anyway, is that there is a way in Microsoft Teams, you can basically what they call PowerPoint Live. And so the problem is oftentimes if you want to share a presentation, at least oftentimes the way that I do it and other people do it is you kind of share your whole screen and then you put your slides into presenter mode. The problem though is then you kind of lose your whole screen, you kind of lose track of where you are and people are trying to chat you and things like that. So in Microsoft Teams, and I know other, Zoom has its own, you can actually it's pretty nice. You can just upload the presentation and then it's nice because it kind of gives you the window of what the if you will, the attendees can see, but you don't lose your whole screen, right? You can sort of flip around the slides and you can still interact with the chat. And you can also see your if you will, your notes in your presentation as well. So I haven't really used it. I think it's been in there for a while, but someone pointed it out to me and I was like, oh, that's good to know. Now, if you're not a Teams person or that's not something you want to do, someone else in the Slack suggested you can just use the reading mode in PowerPoint. So instead of taking over your whole screen, it does a nice job and just gives you the nice pane of the slide, but it doesn't take over the screen. So, I think all these presentation software tools have come up with different ways of doing this. But like at one point, like the thought was like, yeah, we're all in the same room and you want your whole screen to be black. As we all know, when you're doing like a web presentation, you actually don't want your whole screen black. You want some other ways to do it. So I think this PowerPoint Live, kudos to Microsoft Teams for doing it a long time ago. I think Zoom has something similar. And then reading mode, which is like the icon I've just never clicked on in PowerPoint. I've probably been using it for like
exactly
20 plus years. I was like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. So that was another like hidden gem, if you will, on the Microsoft toolbar ribbon. So check those out if you give presentations. Just another way to make your life a little easier.
And that reading mode thing is a tip only because we are part of the Software Defined Talk Slack community, which you could sign up for if you went to softwaredefinedtalk.com/Slack and or just click on the Slack link. I think it's only in the past year that I've learned if there's an upload your presentation for option for your Zooms or your Teams, you should try that out. Or your BrightTalk. It's not crap. It's good stuff. Well, my recommendation, I had a little bit of a sore throat last week. And I asked my wife, Kim, to go get me some cough drops. And as she often does, she bought me a variety pack, but she got me some Fisherman's Friend, which I've had many times in the past. But they're not only like a good cough drop, but my 2.5-year-old, she decided to empty them out into this little ramekin that I have on my desk. And I've had it here for about a week, and I play around with it. But then every now and then I'm kind of bored, and I'll just put one in my mouth. And it's you wouldn't think the Fisherman's Friend would be kind of like a nice little treat, but it's not so bad even if you don't have a sore throat. It's just so you should keep some Fisherman's Friend around. I think they're just lovely little companions for your desk and your sore throat. Now, speaking of lovely companions, little companions, you've been listening to Software Defined Talk, which if you want to get the show notes for things we talked about, conferences, how to join the Slack, and all sorts of things we didn't talk about, you can go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/379 and find all of that. You should subscribe to this podcast. It's really easy. You just search in whatever podcasting catcher, I don't know what the kids call it nowadays, software, search for Software Defined Talk, subscribe to it. Get all of the devices that you have, your kids, your loved ones, your enemies, subscribe it to it. That'll be great. And with that, we'll see everyone next time. Bye-bye.
All right, good job, Kote. You made it. Sounds like your daughter was threatening to break into the show.
We have the littlest podcaster. Now I had it on mute, but when I said bye-bye, she also said bye-bye.
That's fine. People love that. People like the little kid bye-bye, right? That's always, that's a good. I mean, now this would get the YouTube channel video views up, right? Babies and pets. You know.
Can you tell Brandon your new word? Poo-poo.
No, that's good. That'd be good. That's probably. Hey, for all the people on the Twitch stream, like one, of course, always great to see you here. Two, I turned on. I don't know. They said there's some new thing about like chat highlights, like if you're a VIP and things like that. So I see all these boxes in here. I don't know. Do people like it, or is it annoying, or am I the only one seeing it? It just sort of. I don't know. These I don't know. Do you see them, Kote? Do you see highlights?
I have the chat window, and I don't see anything different.
Oh, it doesn't? I guess it's sort of like a way for me to like the moderator, I guess. To like somehow,
yeah. So
it gives me these things.
Yeah.
So nothing's different. Okay. So I'm just seeing all these things. Okay. So I wonder what I'm supposed to do. Am I supposed to give you like a thumbs up or something? All right. This is gonna be a little practice for me to like, how do I actually do something with it? All right. Well, listen, really appreciate everyone watching it, and you are special. Yes, I am special, Michael. That is the problem. So, all right, Kote, any final words for our Twitch audience today?
Even the problem is like if you come back and you've got mud all over your boots, it's gonna seem fine, but that mud's gonna dry, and then it's gonna crumble all over your floor. But then the issue becomes like, but if it's raining, I should leave my boots outside, but then they're going to fill with water. So you got to plan ahead for some way to put your boots up upside down so they don't fill with water.
All right. And with that, Kote's daughter will say goodbye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.